This podcast series includes discussions about ketamine use and the potential harms associated with it. Our goal is to provide balanced, evidence-based information to help listeners better understand ketamine and its impact. If you or someone you know is affected by ketamine, please check the podcast feed for further advice and resources.
I was taking other sorts of drugs, but when I took ketamine, it sort of was the only drug that made me really sort of forget about my problems.
There's a lot of it around. It was easily accessible, very popular. The people that I was hanging around with were also distributing ketamine as well.
And bit by bit, it was just went from like half a gram on a weekend to a gram to a 3.5 a day, until I was doing it back in my care homes, just day in, day out.
Ketamine was just my drug. It was my drug of choice. It just engulfed me.
Welcome to Frontline, where we are taking a balanced and informed look at ketamine use in this new 4-part podcast series. Throughout the next 4 episodes, we will explore what ketamine is, what is the impact on people who use it, how we can reduce those harms, and how we can consider effective responses in the current climate. You might have seen headlines suggesting that ketamine use is widespread among young people in the UK, but the reality is more nuanced. While there has been a moderate increase in use, particularly amongst older teenagers, most young people are not using ketamine, and many that do use will not experience some of the harms we discuss in this podcast. Recent data from the National Drug Treatment Monitoring System shows that the number of under 18s receiving treatment for ketamine-related problems has risen from about 500 in 2020 to 1,200 in 2025. However, these numbers are still far lower than those for substances like cannabis.
Heavy, chronic ketamine use can have serious consequences, particularly bladder and urinary tract damage. While most people who try ketamine will not develop a problem, it's crucial that we improve education, prevention, and support for those who do. Sensationalist media narratives can create false norms, making it seem like ketamine use is more common than it actually is. Instead of fueling moral panic, we need to focus on evidence-based strategies to prevent harm and support those in need. In this 4-part series, we'll explore the real picture of ketamine use, its impact, how we can reduce the harms for those that use, and what the future could hold. Welcome to Part 1. The basics of ketamine.
Ketamine was first synthesized in 1962 by the American scientist Calvin Stevens. It was developed as an alternative to PCP, which had been used as an anaesthetic but often led to severe hallucinations and agitation. Ketamine proved to be a safer option, providing effective pain relief and sedation, while reducing the risk of extreme psychological reactions. By 1970, it was approved for medical use in humans and became widely used in surgical and battlefield settings, particularly during the Vietnam War. In the 1980s and 1990s, ketamine began appearing as a recreational drug, first within underground psychedelic communities before gaining traction in the club and rave scene. Its dissociative and hallucinogenic effects made it popular among partygoers, and it was often referred to as Special K. By the early 2000s, its use had extended beyond nightclubs, with some users taking it in smaller, controlled doses for its reported antidepressant and stress relieving effects.
More recently, particularly in the last decade, we've seen an increase in young people using ketamine in social and private settings, not just for its hallucinogenic properties, but as a way to relax or cope with stress, anxiety, and personal challenges. Some describe it as an escape from daily pressures, which mirrors broader patterns in adolescent substance use, where drugs are used for self-medication rather than purely for recreation. This shift, along with the growing accessibility of ketamine, has contributed to a rise in use, particularly amongst young people.
The following interviews are from people currently in recovery at the Birchwood Kaleidoscope House, a 25-bed treatment centre on the Wirral, Merseyside.
So the first time I came into contact with it was when I was 16 years old. I went to a music festival called Latitude Festival. It was really good. I sort of, what can I say? I was taking other sorts of drugs, but when I took ketamine, it sort of was the only drug that made me really sort of forget about my problems, put me in this sort of like warm, fuzzy state where I just didn't feel like I had any problems. The weight was lifted off my shoulders. It was something that really sort of done the job that I never really knew deep down that I was looking for. When I left the festival, that the first day after I left, I went straight away. I went looking for it on the streets in the city to see who had it. And when I found out that one person had it, it was genuinely like on every single corner there was somebody that was selling it. I realized that it was a very popular drug. It was a reasonable price as well. It was only £20 a gram. So I then started buying it every weekend when I went out, when I sort of went to go see my friends, and we'd just go to sort of a secluded area, park or something like that in the woods, and we'd all sort of do it, smoking joints, and it was just something that was very, it seemed normal. It was just as normal as somebody rolling up a cigarette or a joint or something like that. It was just getting passed around, and you just do it. After about a week, it started being like, instead of it being on a Saturday, it was on the Friday and Saturday, and then after a month, it was like every other day, and then after about 2 or 3 months, it was like every day inside my house. So it went from being something that was only to be sort of consumed within like a close circle of friends to doing it inside of my house with my family, not knowing, hiding it from them. And then, yeah, it just sort of really spiraled out of control, to a point where I was just doing it every single night, going to sleep every single morning. I'd wake up, I'd do a line. It had completely hijacked my life, from the moment I wake up to the moment I went to sleep.
I must have been around skate park a lot growing up, started smoking weed, and then about 13, 14, rave came into the picture. And it was just, must have tried it, didn't really like it the first time. I did it first couple times. It was always the cheapest thing. And before I knew, I was doing it every weekend at raves. And bit by bit, it was just went from like half a gram on a weekend to a gram to a 3.5 a day until I was doing it back in my care homes, just day in, day out. I was throwing up. I couldn't feel my legs. I remember I was doing like MDMA and stuff like that before. So like I was used to being so up, and then out of nowhere, I'm like jelly. Like I skate, so I like having quite good focus on what I was doing. And yeah, it just wasn't really for me the first couple of times, but the more I did it, the less I felt like that and the more I could control it. And once I learned how to control it, it was like just a blockage in my mind. Like I didn't have to think of anything, didn't have to think of anything around me, past, present. Like I was just in my own little bubble that I could control and go about my day doing. And from there, I just kind of fell in love with it. It blocked everything. It's like I had no emotions on it, off it, happy, sad. Like I always describe it as like if I broke my leg, they would numb my leg with ket to numb all the pain if they did a surgery, and it was just the same in my brain. Any past trauma, current trauma, like my dog could have died, my parents could have got married, no matter what, happy or bad, it was blocked. So I was in this numbing state, and it was just the action of it. It's like I smoke, I love having a cigarette. And to be able to rack it, do it, and do it anywhere, it was the whole procedure of it, like crushing it out, sniffing it, and it just became in a habit anywhere I'll go, toilet, buses, trains, home, school, anywhere, in between everything, like you'd have a cigarette, I'd rack a line. And because I wasn't feeling anything, but I was able to control myself, no one really knew I was on it. It was just that kind of hiding, doing it all the time, and it just stuck with me.
I I was 17 years old, and the way that my life was going, my circle, like social group, there was a lot of it around. It was easily accessible. Yeah, it was just very popular. And it started from there, really. 2017, it was for me. I started taking it socially. Weekends, events, festivals, party holidays. And then it sort of progressed into a habit for me. And I'd say habit because I wasn't writing addiction, but it was still a regular occurrence. So I'd take it more often than not, if you will.
So back the early days, obviously when you're growing up, obviously starting from like alcohol, back in the day, like, 15, 16, 2 litre bottles of cider on a park, on a Friday night, getting drunk out your head. And yeah, so then you'd be like 17-year-olds just starting to get into pubs, 18-year-olds starting to get into, pubs and stuff. And then it just grew into like going down into Leeds, going clubbing, and then the party scene, really. Yeah, taking ecstasy regularly on a weekend, cocaine, sometimes a little bit of GHB, but only very, very rarely, and then ketamine as well. And I got in with a bit of there were lads that I knew that, that had sold ketamine quite big time. And the truth be known, there was a lad that I got to know of, and I actually sold drugs for him. So I did that for 2 or 3 years, but it comes to the point where I was going to house parties and I was putting more on house party tables than I was selling. Yeah, it almost seemed like ketamine was just my drug. It was my drug of choice. I was drinking quite I was drinking quite a lot as well with it. I did take ecstasy quite a lot, but that sort of died out, and it just became that ketamine was my drug and my drug only, my drug of choice.
To understand ketamine better, we can look at the drug's wheel model, which groups substances based on their effect. One of the driving forces behind this model was to create a suitable group for ketamine, as it tended to replicate elements of all of the drug families while still maintaining its own identity. So let's look at the families. Stimulants like cocaine and empathogens like MDMA speed up the brain and body, making people feel energetic and alert. Ketamine, in smaller doses, can replicate this effect, but in high doses it does the opposite. It has a sedating effect. Depressants like alcohol and benzodiazepines slow things down, making people feel relaxed or drowsy. Ketamine can also relax people, but it does so by distorting reality, rather than just slowing brain activity. Psychedelics like LSD and psilocybin, the active compound in magic mushrooms, cause hallucinations and changes in perception. Ketamine can have hallucinogenic effects, but they tend to be more disconnected and surreal rather than vivid and colourful. Opioids like heroin, fentanyl, and nitzenes are painkillers that create relaxation and euphoria. While ketamine is also used for pain relief, it works in a completely different way. It doesn't slow the respiratory system down and doesn't form physical addiction. Rather, it can form an intense psychological dependency. And finally, we have cannabinoids like cannabis and synthetic cannabinoid receptor agonists, commonly known as spice. These mainly affect mood and relaxation, whereas ketamine's effects can be much more disorientating.
So where does ketamine fit in? It sits in its own category, dissociatives, alongside drugs like nitrous oxide and PCP. These substances create a sense of detachment from reality, which makes ketamine very different from stimulants, depressants, or even traditional psychedelics.
I think over the last 2.5 years, we've seen an increase, and especially around the last year.
This is Joe Moore, the registered manager at the Birchwood Kaleidoscope House.
More complex referrals coming through to our service, people with quite difficult and complex health conditions, mental health concerns coming through, people that are already at the stage where their life and physical health has been severely impacted. There's always a reason why somebody is taking ketamine. many of the reports that we get is that there was a decline in 2019, so around COVID, and people were more socially isolated. They had to deal with low self-esteem, being alone a lot of the time. And we see a pattern of change where many young people spend a long period of time in their bedroom on their own. So there may be people that use ketamine as part of gaming, as a social thing, although they're not outside. They seem to be using that as something to do with fun and sporadic entertainment while using VR headsets with their friends. You've got people that don't want to spend £10 a drink on a night out, so they use a bit of ketamine before they go out. They might have an E, and then they've had a cheaper night than it would have been than with the alcohol involved. They're also not getting any hangover symptoms when they're using. So it allows them to use quite a lot of ketamine, and then the next day they're able to just continue with their daily activities. This is before it progresses to obviously the dependent level. So there's a big shift really of how drugs are now used. It used to be going out to festivals and parties, going to gigs, but we see more use on their own. When we see and we hear about the 10-year-olds and the 15-year-olds starting in their schools, it's almost a chance meeting where they're sort of going, oh, just have a bit of this, and they try it. And then they enjoy that K-hole experience. But that quickly wears off the more that they continue to use.
According to the Office for National Statistics, ketamine use has more than doubled since 2016 and more than tripled amongst 16 to 24-year-olds. In 2023, approximately 3.2% of individuals aged 16 to 24 reported using ketamine, a rate 4 times higher than the national average.
It's so readily available on places like TikTok, Snapchat. You can go anywhere in the UK pretty much and get ketamine within 5 minutes. So there's QR codes that people will scan at university and they'll know they can get a dealer. You can go and buy kilos of it on the web and get it next day delivery. So it's hugely accessible, and the turnaround of the drugs going through the dealers is really high and fast because people are able to buy them in bulk because they're such low cost. And there's areas around the UK where they're using it for weight loss. So they will be buying £2 deals, popping it in tea, having ketamine tea as part of their weight loss program for working age mothers. So it's a diverse drug, really, but it is hitting the older ends. Our average is 26 years old who are presenting for treatment. So we'll see people as old as 40, and then obviously the younger generation of 18. But it's those people. How do you actually attract those people to access treatment when they're 14 years old? We're not relevant. Professionals are absolutely not relevant to them. We're not with it. We're not up to date with all this modern technology and, the use of these devices and websites. So it's made us on the back foot, really. We are delayed in our approach and our reactions because we just lack that knowledge. So we have to really learn from our service users and gain that knowledge from them because they are vital to this. There's 80% of our information comes just directly from the service user.
This is Lisa Buckley, the National Lead for Detox and Rehab with CGL. Change Grow Live is a national health and social care charity. They help people with challenges including drugs, alcohol, housing, justice, health and well-being.
What I've noticed, particularly since being in this role, is hearing it mentioned more. And that's what pricked my ears up, particularly over the last year and within my role, because I work with 37 plus inpatient providers and rehab providers. It was them raising it as an issue. So it didn't initially come internally from our drug and alcohol services. I started hearing about it when I was going out and doing visits to inpatient providers and rehabs. And it actually started with a conversation with Joe Moore from Birchwood Detox and Rehab on the Wirral. And she'd mentioned the increase that they had noticed in the number of referrals that we're getting for people who were using ketamine, and the real concerning physical and mental health issues that she was observing in those people that were being admitted. And we started then asking those questions. I'd go out with my colleague Julie and we'd go and visit more inpatient units and rehab. And more people were saying, yeah, actually, what, we have seen an increase. And God, yeah, what people are dealing with in terms of the physical health issues, particularly the chronic incontinence and the pain that people were trying to deal with. And I just thought, as part of my role as a national lead, I've got to do something about this, because the crisis is here. It's not that it's looming, and we've got services that are trying to manage the best they can, and they're learning every day in terms of the best management and supporting people with, some really catastrophic health issues. So off the back of my initial conversation with Joe Moore, I decided to put together like a mini conference, just put it on for an hour and a half, and identified various people that were doing some great work, including across the organisation, who could share their best practice, and hopefully it would support other services and other providers that we have on the framework as well. So that went ahead in October. And we had Joe, who was a speaker. We had a doctor and a consultant who were talking about referral pathways that they put in place to primary and secondary care. And then we also had a service manager from our St. Helens service as well, Rachel Fance. And she was talking about the amazing work that they've put in around the response to ketamine in terms of what they were seeing. And it really did get me thinking about it's crucial, really, as an organisation, that we're offering this service consistently across all of our services. Some services might not be seeing a lot of ketamine use at the moment, whereas others might be, but aren't necessarily kind of genned up in terms of the education and knowing how they need to respond if somebody is using ketamine approaches their service.
This is Peter Furlong, the National Harm Reduction Lead for Change, Grow, Live.
Yeah, well, my understanding is it was always historically, obviously, it's not a new drug. It's been around a long time, and it was predominantly a party drug, a club drug. But over the last couple of years, in particular, we've seen younger people using it in different settings, and different uses. So it shifted from that club drug to more a replacement of other drugs. So people who are using Xanax for self-medication reasons, people younger people, young adults, young people using it for self-medication for anxiety. It's people are talking about using it at the end of the day to chill out, the way you'd have a beer. And, given the price of the way alcohol's gone, I can understand that. So real change from that sort of, going on a rave, a night out, whatever the terminology is nowadays, once or twice a month to more regular use for different reasons.
This is James Mawhinney, the Senior Social Worker and Strategic Safeguarding Lead for Change, Grow, Live, St. Helens.
So ketamine sort of started appearing on the scene more frequently in around about 2021 in St. Helens. Started off with just the odd person who was experiencing using daily, but then substantially grew, and in about 2022, towards the beginning of 2023, we sort of seen a massive explosion in the use, coupled by a couple of different things. With overnight, it become really significantly cheap to purchase, and that trend has continued until present day. So some of our young people are paying as little as £5 for a gram of ketamine. We also started to see it change significantly again over the last few years from something that people were using maybe recreationally, maybe once or twice a week, to that daily use. So again, ketamine's been around for a long time, but more significantly now what we're seeing is daily use, and I feel like a lot of that was on the back of COVID and the change in nature of drug trends with young people after that experience. So we've seen, because a lot of our younger service users don't use things like alcohol, And I think what we seen, during COVID, when they weren't able to, leave the house at certain periods, they weren't able to go to shops and buy alcohol when they were, hanging around with the friends and stuff. But what they could do was get a drug dealer to come and drop drugs off at the property. So we've seen a change at that point where they were starting to use things like just oxide, etc. And being able to get drugs delivered to them, and then that's where ketamine started to appear on the scene along with that.
This is Jack Randles, a social work student at the Birchwood.
I got offered this placement in the first place, and I got offered it, not really knowing I was going to go into addiction or anything, and then I'm coming here with no real understanding of it or education, thinking, right, what's the drug problem in the UK at the minute? Heroin, crack, and cocaine. That's what I thought everyone would be in here, like long-term heroin users or like binge cocaine users. And the big boss of here, Joe, said a big part of it is ketamine here, especially, and he said it's been a change in the last couple of years where it's become a massive thing on the streets, and it's because of the intensity of the physical deterioration in a short period of time, and that's what I've seen. Like, that's the main thing I've really took away from being here, is like how much it messes your body up in a very short time period. I mean, there's a lot of people. I'm 27. I know there's people here younger than me, my age, and they've got serious health problems from it. And it's been really eye opening to see. Like, I always saw it as kind of a party drug. It's a big thing up in Liverpool. Like, I know teenage kids who do it all the time. Like, I know when I was growing up, it was a thing that people did all the time. Like, and it's not seen by the younger generation as an addictive thing culturally, I don't think. I think it's just seen as, you go and something you do a festival, something you do in like a weird, like, gaff night, but it's not seen as something that people do it's not seen as something that you will end up doing every day.
In the next episode, we'll explore the impacts of ketamine use on those that use it on a regular basis. If you or someone you know has been affected by ketamine use and needs support, please check the podcast feed for further advice and resources.
This has been a Frontline production by Risk and Resilience.